So hi everybody, welcome back to RM Podcast FL. As you can tell, we're actually in a studio today. It's very different. Studio podcast suites here in Jacksonville, Florida. Super excited to have the opportunity to come here. Definitely want to give a big shout out to Gary. And today I have the Jacksonville Podcasters founders. Hi guys, how are y'all today?
Hello.
Awesome. This is super nice studio. Don't you like it?
It's gorgeous.
I'm still speechless. This is an amazing space.
I love it. I'm just going to keep asking you guys questions so we can stay here all day.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So I want to pass on mic to you first, Blythe. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you also have your own podcast, Bonjour.
Yes.
And also, what do you do full-time? Is your podcast your full-time gig? Tell us a little bit more.
Well, I've been a content creator for going on 10 years now, and I've done some sort of content, blogging, vlogging. I got an opportunity to move into the space of professional broadcasting here at the local level. So I did that for a handful of years. And then about a year and a half ago, I stepped out and went on my own and started up my own business, digitaldispatch.io. It's a website and marketing platform for trucking and logistics companies. And then I also just needed a creative outlet. So I started up Bonjour with Blythe.com, which was a transition from my sports radio background. So I kind of transferred my sports podcast into a more of an entrepreneurial lifestyle podcast.
Nice. Weren't you in Dallas recently? Was it in Dallas in Texas, or what was that at?
Dallas, I was there for I think like a year and a half ago, maybe in Dallas. But I've
it's still free. I just looked at the video recently too, because you were giving the presentation.
You're probably thinking maybe Atlanta?
I loved your outfit, first off.
Thank you.
Probably Atlanta.
I picked the outfit.
He says Atlanta.
Yeah, I think it was Atlanta because I actually, for that outfit, I picked out the outfit before I even wrote my damn speech. So
yeah,
it was one of those things where I was like, how am I going to look?
Well, I saw the outfit and I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to see the rest of the interview too now.
Yes, it worked. Then it definitely
Tension
worked.
grabbing.
But no, I think because of my sports background, I've been given a lot of opportunities, especially in the trucking and logistics space. Yeah. Just because sports, I think, are just it's almost like a camaraderie. It's a great icebreaker. It's a great way to bond with other people without really knowing them first. So I think it helped me sort of stand out in that freight network, which has been really a blessing in disguise.
Nice. That's awesome. How about you, Bart? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My turn. My name is Badr Milligan. I host the Short Box podcast. I wish it was my full time, but it is not. I work in marketing as a project manager during the day. What was the other questions?
During the night, I'm a podcaster.
Yeah, project manager by day, superhero podcaster by night. So a little bit about the podcast. The Short Box podcast is Jacksonville, Florida's premier comic book and pop culture podcast. I've been doing it since 2012 with a wide array of guests between friends and then folks that I had on the show that became friends. So we've had a ever-changing cast and right now I currently host a show with my good friend Cesar Cordero, Andrew Torres, Edmund Danzar, and Ashley Lanny Hoy. We talk about comic books. We talk about pop culture. We also have an emphasis on Jacksonville, so we'll have like local artists, writers, creators, event planners, photographers, etc. We try to put a spotlight on Jacksonville as much as we do some of the other kind of nerdier topics.
Nice. And didn't you guys, what was it, recently that you guys did the TEDx?
Yeah, that's right. That was, I want to say it was either October or November, but we hosted December. Okay, yeah, thank you. So we hosted the TEDx Unmasked panel, which was a panel discussion or salon discussion on comic books and its impacts on pop culture, as well as video games and whatnot. So we got to host that in collaboration with TEDx FSCJ.
That's awesome. I mean, I go to FSCJ, and when I saw that, I was like, that is pretty awesome. Yeah. So I didn't know you guys by then, because I ran through Jack's Podcasters on the December meeting.
Okay, wow. So it was right around that same time.
But then I was like, hold on, he looks familiar. And then I was like, hold on, let me do the whole connection. Because you guys created Jacksonville Podcasters Group.
Yeah, yes. The Jax Podcasters Unite group, yeah.
How did that idea come about?
So the group had its first meetup in April 2018. I don't remember the exact date, but it was April 2018 at Space 42, where we had our first meetup, and then from there, that's where the Jax Podcasters Unite group was born. But its birth really was just the simple fact that I wanted to see how many podcasters would show up if I had put out the call for a meetup. I was going to every single artist lounge or meetup. I kind of got a brain fart going on, but they had a similar kind of setup where every month they invited local artists to show up, network, kind of just collaborate, just talk and whatnot. And I was going to those a lot, and they always had great turnout. And I was just inspired by that to see if I could do it for podcasting, because I was just slowly meeting and hearing about more and more local Jacksonville podcasts.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, let me just, put the call out. And I was fortunate enough to have Blythe and Ryan Paul Thompson support me and help me out on that first one. And they've been, a great help with all of them. So, they took, just this kind of playful idea and helped me kind of make it something official.
I'm in a project manager.
Yeah, well, I mean, thankfully, amongst all, I'm not even like the best planner in the group. I think between Blythe and Ryan, they both are great planners. I mean, Ryan has so many years experience of just like throwing events and having people to come together. And then, Blythe has a great mind for like marketing and an organization. So, I was really lucky.
Creation and everything.
Yeah.
Collaboration. That's really what the goal of the group has always been about, collaboration over competition, because we really wanted to network with other podcasters. And I think I can speak for Badr when I say that first event, to see that many people show up, that was shocking.
How many were at the first event?
I think close to, I want to say it was somewhere
30 people.
No,
Oh, wow.
a lot more. No, it was a lot more. It was closer. It was in between 40 and 50. I just remember, all at once.
Well, I would also count to we had some friends show up too. So I don't know that they count as like podcasters.
Don't tell him that.
The safety net, just in case of the event bails. It looks good in pictures because we got like
we have free food and drinks.
Yeah,
Please show up. Somebody that was, that's always the terror when you have an event. Is like, is anybody going to show up? And people. I mean,
your friends might just start a podcast. It's a new thing, Well, I say it's a new thing, but yours has been since 2012.
Yeah, and I remember, and that's why that first one was so eye-opening, because it was like, man, I remember, in 2012, 2013, those early years, I would tell people, I do a podcast, and I would have to explain what is a podcast, and Lord forbid if I had to show them how to like subscribe or get it.
It's that app on your phone that you delete because you're like, what is this?
Well, and not only that, but there wasn't that many podcast apps like there is now. I mean, like Spotify was still in its infancy. It wasn't doing podcasts. It was mainly just Apple iTunes, et cetera. But, fast forward to 2018 to see, close to 30 or 40, I think that's a safe bet. People just show up and they all have podcasts. They've all been doing it for various amount of years. And it was like, man, I've never heard of you, but this is awesome. Like you like the same stuff I do. And then just to see it continuously grow and the amount of people that show up. I mean, like the different skill levels of people that are like, hey, I just heard about the group. I'm interested in starting a podcast. To, I've been doing the podcast for a couple of years. I just need to, learn something new. To the, to the other side of the extreme, which is I've been doing it for a hot minute. I'm making, some good leeway. I'm making money off it. I can teach, everyone else something. It's been really inspiring.
Nice. And didn't we have the first one was on February, for the first quarter, right? Before the lovely
that was the last
virus.
That was almost like the last social event, I think, for us, for a lot of our friends too, or right. A lot of the community. It was in February because you had earned the competition for that night and to be able to come to these studios.
Finally, we're here.
So we're now in June, and so I think everybody just kind of been in hibernation since then.
Yeah, we scheduled for like end of March, trying to get all our schedules, and then the whole lockdown. Yeah, and then afterwards, like, I was like, okay, let's reschedule it, guys. And Gary's been amazing and like being patient.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was, like I said, April 2018 for the first one. And then the remainder of that year was just kind of, we weren't really doing it quarterly. It was just like, maybe we should do it now. But 2019 was the beginning of us saying, okay, every quarter we'll do one. And then the only one we've had this year has been, that first quarter, February.
But they were like, what was it, like I would say probably like 80, 90 people.
That was our most, every single, and that's what's been wonderful, is every single event, they've gotten better and better, and not just by like the amount of people that show up, but just the quality of the conversation. Like, we have a few friends that still show up to them that don't have podcasts, and we barely have time to speak to them. It's like, I know that you've been supporting us from the beginning, but we got a network.
We don't need you guys.
You don't got to play extra.
There's still
or
free
background.
food over there.
We know why you're here.
I mean, the guys at Buzzsprout have been amazing too, though, because they're allowing us their studios and everything.
Yeah.
And that's what has been really sort of, I think, eye-opening for a lot of people. I hosted with Buzzsprout since 2014 and only recently learned that they were located in Jacksonville. A buddy of mine recommended them when I got started, and he lives in Cleveland, Ohio. So it was kind of wonderful to be able to know that this is a local company, and they've really helped us grow, not just with the, allowing us to host the space, but just getting the messaging out and networking with other podcasters and just taking it up a notch. They've been super helpful.
Well, they gave us also, the Jacksonville podcasters, they gave us tickets to go to PodFest.
That too.
Yeah,
So when I was down there, I actually met a girl, Stephanie Nieto. She used to be the producer for the Survivor show, and now she has her own podcast in Panama. And whenever I introduced her to Alban, they're looking at her stats, and she's like, "Oh my God! Like, I actually get to meet like the people that run Buzzsprout." And I was like, cool. "Yeah." I was like, I felt cool. I was like, "They're in Jacksonville. Like, let me introduce you." But it's just so amazing because it's like connections after connection. Like, and you don't realize it, the power of the podcasting, like what you'd be able to do or connect with, or even just like I've done interviews over the years, and I'm like, over 1 year will be soon, couple of weeks will be a full year. But just the power of podcasting, it's bananas, honestly.
Yeah, my knee-jerk reaction was almost, everyone's got a podcast. But as much as, I used to say it just to be kind of like annoying, it's true, and it's also like really eye-opening and inspiring because you never know who has a podcast, Like, that's really cool that, someone that worked on Survivor decides to start their own podcast.
Yeah.
Like, think about all the stories or connections she has.
Like she quit Survivor and then she started a blog as anonymous, and now she has this podcast that everybody just loves. And I'm like, I just want to listen. It's in Spanish, but I'm like, I want to listen to it just because. Like,
that's cool.
It's like the Calm app, like you listen the way she talks. And I'm like, you should do a contract with them. I'm like, I'm serious.
Take up ASMR,
Right?
Yeah, I think to your point, I think we were talking in the car. Like, the first one was one of like the best ones, but I think getting that first one at Buzzsprout was like the next, like, okay, this is the next level. This is the next, like, sense of excitement. Because ever since meeting them, it was like just a well of inspiration, information, the collaboration, like how open they are. You know, it's funny to hear like your friend was like really excited to meet him.
Oh yeah, she's like, that? I was like, I was like, hey, Alban.
But for us, it's like
she like loves it. She keeps bragging about how much she loves her podcasting host, and I'm like,
that's
here,
cool.
that's
like,
the people.
They're so approachable, like, and they're willing to like. When we told them about this, like, they were all for it, and I think that's what kind of inspired us and gave us more fuel to keep like the meetups going and stuff.
Yeah, and even when we go there, like, they're not like, do you host with us?
Right. They don't even push their services. They casually mention it, but it's definitely a different approach than a lot of companies would take.
Like, I use a different one because, again, like, my podcasting came as I was bored, hating my life, and I was like, I want to connect with people. I guess I'll just start a podcast, interview people, find an excuse, and now where we're at, I'm like, what in the world is going on right now?
That's awesome.
Like, but no, they didn't push it. Like, I'm using a completely different album. Just mentioned it like once or twice. He's like, if you need help, like, I can help you with that. He's like, but not at all pushy or nothing like that. Like, I just want to switch with him just because.
Right. Just because of their customer service.
Like my Albania podcast, like I started with them. I have it with them. Which in Albania, it's not even like a thing, a podcast. Like,
not yet.
Not yet, but it's my first one. My Albanian one is my first one.
Aww.
There's another one, but they talk about like it just like a church podcast. They're just like every Sunday they record it and put it there.
Wait, so you're like literally the second podcast in
Albania? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Hey, that's a good niche market.
Yeah, I would market the hell out of that.
It's so weird when I speak.
Like the number one podcast in Albania.
No, dude, like when I record, I have to like keep re-recording because I like mumble. Like I'm forgetting how to speak proper Albanian. Like in English, I'm like, this comes so easy. In Albanian, I'm like lost. Oh. What did you guys say though to like people that want to start a podcast because they want to get the ads and they want to get the income and they want to be the Joe Rogan?
It's a rude awakening. There's some lofty goals
that'll be humbled very quickly if they go into that with that approach. And I think podcasting is a lot like other mediums where you start out at a new social media platform, you start out with blogging, or you start out with YouTube. You're always going to start and the numbers are going to be nothing. Yeah. You have to keep at it. You have to keep going. And even if you only get 10 listeners for your first podcast, or even if you only get one and it's like your grandma listening, you have to keep at it because otherwise you're never going to grow. You're never going to get better. And the only way you do get better is by getting the reps. Yeah.
And you got to be, I think you already said passionate, but like that's always my first go-to word of advice to anyone. Because ever since starting this group, I think it's safe to say like we'll have folks come in that are interested in starting a podcast. They always ask the same thing. All right, like I want to start a podcast.
It's the number one question. How do I make money? And it's like, well, you got to start creating first. You got to provide value.
Yeah, and I tell them like, focus on the content because it's got to be something that you need to be able, that you're passionate enough to talk about, knowing that maybe no one is listening. like those first years of recording the short box, like I did not know who was listening. We really did it just out of like a passion and love and just wanting to be around each other and talk. So if you're going in with like that mindset of like, this will be a quick buck, I'm going to make, buku, get ad sponsors, is a very slow process. Mm-hmm. Like I think it took us, just in the last 3 years, we started getting sponsors. Yeah. And that was never our focal point. It took even more work to get in that business mindset.
And it's not necessarily with a lot of podcasters. Like for me, I don't sell sponsorships for my podcast. What podcasting does for me is it opens the door to other opportunities. And I think that's you have to kind of put the value in your own mind of where do I want this to take me? Who can I use my podcast to get introductions to have interviews on and be able to have a conversation with someone especially for like an executive, like a lot of executives don't get asked to be interviewed on a podcast, and if you can make that connection with somebody, that is an additional person that's in a high platform that you can then I don't want to say take advantage of, but that's a new connection.
Well, it's a win-win situation for both of y'all. They have something to promote and you have something to learn from them, so it's a win-win situation.
I got into radio and I had never broadcasted a day in my life, and it was because I was a writer. It was because I had a blog experience that it allowed me that pathway, and that's usually, from what I found out at a later date, that's usually the path that most people in broadcasting take. They start out as a writer, then they get into radio, and then they get into TV. It's never the reverse. So you have to really be in the trenches creating that content for years before you're ever going to get an opportunity handed to you.
That is so true. Just recently, because like when coronavirus hit, for example, which is like a whole different thing. How did coronavirus treat you guys? Like, were you guys locked at home going bananas like me at times?
No, I would say maybe at the beginning, but I feel like we kind of hit our stride pretty early because we had actually moved in together a month before Corona hit. So that was kind of an eye-opening experience.
You get to know each other when you move in together, but it's
very quickly.
On steroids.
How did that go? You're so good at
it. I know some relationships did not last. I feel like it's made us stronger.
Yeah. That's awesome. How about work? Did you get busier?
Yes, I did, from just a tech standpoint. And the only way I can sort of theorize this in my mind is that people have time now. So they're at home, they have that concentration time, they know that, a new website or a new marketing project has been on the back burner, they just haven't had that time to concentrate in the office. So when everybody is staying home, that's immediately when everybody wanted work done. So all this break time that a lot of people have experienced, it's been almost stressful, and not almost, it's definitely been stressful for me because I feel like I'm being overworked and I'm not enjoying this break time that everybody else seems to be getting.
Which is awesome though, but like an advice to all the business owners out there, don't leave this when a virus hits. Because if you're marketing, like if they hired you from the beginning, if you already had a marketing strategy and a website and everything, you could have came up with another strategy and actually upped the sales at this time. No, start from scratch.
Well, and then...
Because that's what my clients are like struggling with too, because it's like, oh, well, I need to do the website now since I have more time. I'm like, well, if we did this from the beginning a couple months ago and I told you, like... we probably would have promoted your stuff better now.
Everybody's plan should have been just thrown out the window at whenever Corona hit.
It's goodness. But it's true, though. Like, the power of podcasting, honestly, it's amazing. The best, I'm going to brag here for a second because I think this is really awesome. The best interview, don't get mad to the other interviews, you guys, but I think it's pretty amazing to interview the FBI hostage negotiator.
Oh, wow.
You guys seen here's my accent. Waco?
Waco.
Yeah, that's what I said. Half of that series, it's actually based on Gary Nossner's book. He was the FBI hostage negotiator, and he's been on the podcast.
Huh.
Nice.
Congrats.
I know. That's what talking about the power of podcasting, connecting with some amazing people like that. I'm like, I see the FBI building when we pass by. I'm like, this building is awesome, but I don't know nobody inside. Like, we have one down the road here.
Yeah, that's true. There is an FBI building in the area.
That's the type of value that at least I personally put above like the money making. Like, in my situation at least, I have a full-time job that pays the bills, that puts money in my pockets. The podcast, we make some revenue, but for me, it's always been about the experience. Like, because of the podcast, I've gotten to interview like some of my favorite writers, some of my favorite artists. I've gotten to like be invited to conventions to go like do panels. I've gotten to, just the TEDx FSCJ thing, like, leave a stamp in like my own city and help out and contribute. Like, those are the type of, that's the type of value that I'm using the podcast for.
It's not about money. It doesn't have to be just about money. No. It can be rewarding in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, but it's also like if you want to do X thing and you don't find let's say you work corporate, right? And you don't find upper management, you don't find the boss giving you the opportunity, make a podcast to show your skills and just grab the mic and just talk what's in your mind. I don't know, like I'm leadership management, growth, like in the business stuff. So if somebody didn't provide me the opportunity, I just got a mic and start talking. I'm like, you don't want to hear me in the office? Well, I guess I'll just lunch World Wild.
And I think that's like
I'll show you.
I think that's a very attractive aspect of podcasting is that it empowers your voice when maybe you weren't too confident about it. It's like, well, who would care to listen? Well, I mean, you never know. That's the thing. Like, we didn't think that anyone would care to listen to our conversations about comic books or music or any of that stuff, but like. Just through staying true to ourselves and like just leading with passion, like it gave. I know for me, it made me way more confident, just overall. But especially in talking and especially in interviews, like I firmly believe. I always give credit to the podcast for helping me land my job. Like it is always. I always put it on the podcast. On the resume because I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the amount of work I've put in, and it's always a good like conversation starter. I've always been asked. So tell me about this podcast that you got here on your resume. It's usually the first thing they want to know about.
It's different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. And I think when you can show, and you can break it down and explain the amount of time, work, effort, planning, like strategy that goes into it, like it's impressive because it's like, wow, you did this all on your own. You weren't getting paid for this. You just, you were passionate. I think it shows. It puts a spotlight on drive,
Yeah, dedication and everything, because it is a lot of hours. Like the editing, you have to listen to it.
I was up till like midnight yesterday. Like I was like, I got to put this episode out for the, and it's like at a certain point, like it also becomes bigger than yourself. I know for me, it's like, no, I've got listeners out there that this means something to them. Like we got an awesome email during speaking about like everything going, how things kind of shifted with the coronavirus and whatnot. We had received an email like 3 weeks in from a listener that was like, man, your show, the fact that you guys are still putting out weekly content, like it's getting me through it, man. It's like he was going through a really rough patch. I mean, he emailed us, told us everything. He was like, but you know what? Every week when I see a new episode pop up, man, it gives me a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm like, damn.
It's amazing.
It becomes bigger than yourself, especially when you can build that relationship with with your listenership. Sort of like how we were saying, like, podcasting has given you opportunities, like the FBI agent. Like, that's how else would you have gotten that other than podcasting?
Never. Probably dream about it, but that's about it. Like, read the book and it's like, this is awesome. I would love to meet this person, but that's about it.
I mean, for me, I know it's opened up doors as well, but it's also given me a relationship with people I don't think I would have ever had the opportunity to, have a friendship with.
Doesn't it, like, it grows your confidence too a lot, because you're like, I had just this idea and it just taking off right now. And people are taking you serious.
I think my path into podcasting was just a little bit different, because I always had co-hosts to play off of, and we were already doing a radio show. So what was the extra step on just taking that audio file and putting it up on to a podcast feed? So that's how I got started. Transitioning away from co-hosting to solo hosting was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying, because here I am just talking and I'm like, is anybody even going to listen to this? But to Badr's point, it was one of those things when you start getting feedback from people, or when your friends start telling you, hey, my friend told me about your podcast, that's when it's like, oh my gosh, people actually listen? Like, wow. I guess I got to keep this thing going. So it was, there was a big transition for me going, and almost terrifying. Like, it was very just terrifying. It's a good way to put it, because you're sitting in front of a mic and you don't have anybody else to bounce ideas off of. It's just yourself. Yeah. But I learned very quickly I can record an hour-long show with no problem.
Yeah.
It's me talking.
I got mad respect for solo podcasters. Like, that is a different
you have co-hosts.
Yeah.
We're just on the mic. Yeah. Well, I have people on the Zoom, but technically.
Yeah. When I'm dropping the ball 75% of the time, I can rely on the other 3.
Not dropping the ball.
What do you guys think about Joe Rogan itself? Like, what was the $100 million deal to move everything with Spotify? That's a big, big thing for the podcast world.
I thought it was very interesting, because within that 2-week span, it was Joe Rogan going to Spotify, and then you also had the Caller Daddy fiasco that was going on, or playing out in the public eye, with just a couple I don't know if you guys know the background, but a couple of the co-hosts had a bit of a falling out. They tried to leave their network with Barstool. They tried to go somewhere else. But just during that whole 2 weeks, it was almost like the first time that you saw the business side of podcasting creeping out.
Like, podcasts making headlines in, like, Business Journal and things like that. I mean, it definitely goes to show, like, where the ceiling for podcasts is, and it's very, very high.
And you hear some of the numbers that were being talked. I mean, Joe Rogan, 100 million, and then you had these other 2 hosts that they had signed on to earn $70,000 a year. Which, I mean, living in New York, it's kind of it's
move to Florida, guys.
Right? You would that money, that $70,000 would go a lot further.
Half of it is taxes.
I guess with a lot of their bonuses, they started getting merch bonuses. That's how they made a good majority of their money. So hearing those sides of how they made their money, I thought was really interesting, that it wasn't all just through ads. It was through all these different partnerships that they had.
Yeah, but I actually read an interview. I saw a video when they're actually breaking down the Spotify, like how their stock changed. And within 24 hours after they launched the news with Joe Rogan, Spotify itself had made close to $28 billion in 24 hours, because their stock went up so much. And apparently they had taken the deal to like Apple and to YouTube, and they're just joked about it. They're like, yeah, it's not worth that much, man. Like, we're not going to beat that deal.
YouTube is going to get hit very hard by Joe Rogan leaving.
It is. It's I mean, that gives such a big window to the podcast world. I feel like now that you have a podcast, you'd get more respected. So thanks, Joe Rogan, for it. But I feel like you'd get a lot more respected because of it.
Yeah, and Joe Rogan doesn't come off like a very flashy guy. Like, that's what I've always respected about him, is that he just seems to, like, kind of keep his head down, and he just podcasts. He just talks. He looks like he just generally likes having people on, talking, having conversations, and whatever. Like, he's never come off like I'm doing this for the money. I'm chasing the money. It looked like this opportunity just came to him. I think Spotify just saw what he was doing with YouTube and figured, hey, we got to lock that down.
And I think it also speaks to the transition for a lot of viewers who don't want to just read a headline, don't want to just be fed clickbait articles. They want a long-form discussion with experts within various different industries. And that's what he's always been really good at. I don't know always. I've only really been listening or really watching on YouTube for a handful of years now, but I think he's been doing it, since 2009? Like the early days of podcasting when you really had to explain what the hell it was.
Yeah. And I remember one of the best interviews that I've saw from him on the YouTube videos, because I just let it play in the background.
Me too.
It was with Jocko Willink and Tulsi. I forgot her last name.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes. There were both of them, and it was one of the best interviews that they actually talk about economy and, diplomacy and the war. And it was like a 3-hour long. And I'm like, why can't we, all the politicians just sit down and have a conversation?
I think they're scared to have a long-form conversation like that.
Like, I think both of them are awesome. He comes from, he was a U.S. Navy SEAL. He comes from that world. She's a vet herself. Like, they both talking about it. And it's interesting to see it from, like, the U.S. Navy SEAL and her perspective. He's a consulting, and she's still, she's in Hawaii, like, with the politics involved. It was just a very open, good conversation. I'm like, I would love to hear everybody talk like this.
Absolutely. Especially all politicians. That would be fantastic to be able to hear their in-depth thoughts around difficult subjects.
Oh, yeah.
You don't hear that now.
Absolutely. Now, what is the biggest mistake that you guys made when you started podcasting? Because I know I can name a few. Or like the biggest lessons, I would say. So if somebody's trying to start a podcast.
Have a backup recording.
Ooh.
You never want to. I think one of my first solo hosting, because when I was doing radio, I wanted to do more of like the entertainment. I wanted to talk more like nerdy stuff, and that's not really a good fit for sports radio. So I did do some solo hosting on a live streaming platform called BidChat. I don't even think they're still around. But I remember recording a 2-hour show and no audio. I sat and I watched this video, and I thought that I was just broadcasting to the world, and I had people calling in. It was that type of show. They were calling in to tell me that there was no audio.
Oh,
so it was a 2-hour show with no audio. I had nothing. And that would be probably my biggest piece of advice is test your audio before you record every single time.
You probably thought that was the coolest show ever, too, though.
You're
like, 2 hours.
Proud.
I'm like, 2 hours?
Can't wait to listen back to this one.
Right? Like 2 hours. I pulled out a great show today. Successful day today.
Spotify, watch it.
Yeah. I didn't even know until like the next day, too. I was like, wow.
Oh, my God. I'm so sorry.
I know.
I think that's a good beginner one. I think I'm gonna go like intermittent. Like when you start seeing like some traction, your downloads, your listens are looking good, and you're ready to take it to that next level. I know for at least for our team, and me specifically, it took me too long to take it seriously and invest in it more, such as like. Whatever, flyers, cards, like and merch too. Especially at least our style of show, with it being about comic books and it being such a visual medium, and kind of dealing with collectors. We should have had merch sooner. We should have had like a website up a lot sooner. Just like once we lock down hey, we've got a good show format. Our sound sounds good. I think we should have started investing in ourselves a little more as far as like marketing and getting like a brand established.
Do you really think the podcast needs a website though?
Oh, I will let the website queen over here explain why.
Yes, 100% you need a website, because a website is one of the few places on the internet that you control. So your website and your email list, your social media accounts, you do not control them. To an extent, you don't necessarily control the hosting for your podcast either. As long as you control your content, which is your website, then that is the location where you can send all of that traffic. Because even nowadays, like the analytics are getting better with podcasting, especially with Buzzsprout. They just released, I think, a few months ago, their new analytics platform, which is fantastic. It's probably one of the best in the game, but it's still a little limited. You don't know where your listeners are coming from. You don't know how long they're listening. You don't know if they're following you on social media. With your website, you can do all of that. You can collect leads. I would say that the show notes has gotten a lot better with podcasting because you're able to add in hyperlinks now and things like that. But still, the SEO value isn't there yet. But I would preach to the high heavens that you absolutely need a website. You don't need a fancy one, but you do need a place where your website lives, where you can send your listeners to so that they can contact you, they can reach out, they can follow you on social media, they can just see what you're about. And that also gives you that added layer of credibility that if an advertiser is looking for a show like yours, they're going to go to Google. They're going to do a search. And so that your website should be coming up when they're doing a search like that. And then you also get a chance to show off like with Badr's website, we did that about, a year ago? But with that website, we can show off the events that you've done in the past. If you're looking at a podcast feed of like recent shows, you're not necessarily going to get that same vibe.
Yeah. But can't you fix it with the SEOs, though? Can't you fix it? Because technically you're integrating from whatever podcast platform you're hosting it, you integrate it on your website. But if you actually make a post about it and then hyperlink it to go to that episode, that would actually help with the search engine.
Well, the way I do for every single episode is that I make a blog post for it, and I still post the majority of the content that's in the show notes. I'll post that still in the blog post itself, but I'm doing it strictly for SEO value and then also for just added value for the listener. If I'm on social media or if I'm on email or anything like that, I want to send that traffic to my website because I want to know where they're coming from. I want to know where to put my effort into. Should I still keep, posting my shows to Instagram if I'm not getting any traffic, if I'm not getting listeners from there? Where should I spend my time more valuably?
So here's something interesting that I've discovered, because if I use like my Google Analytics for my website, it actually shows a lot more countries. It's like 100-something countries, which I'm like, okay, I've never been there, compared to my actual podcast, which actually, I'm glad you brought it up. Like, you guys created the website and everything, because that actually gives you a better idea of who's tracking, like, who's looking at your website.
Exactly.
Who's looking. Because they might be looking at your website, but on the podcast host, it doesn't necessarily give you the actual correct country of where they're coming from.
And they can do their best estimate, but Google Analytics is the best in the game for a reason. They have the most, analytic power, and it's free. So installing something like that onto your website, even if it's a very basic website, a lot of podcast players, they have the ability to have a player where it's all of your episodes or like 5 episodes. But for every single show that I do, I have that single player episode. I post it to that. I always usually include a video in the podcast as well. So I am sending my content wherever it's most convenient for my audience. If they want to listen on YouTube or if they want to watch on YouTube, there's an audio version of it as well, and then they can also have the website as a resource for them. Yeah,
because I mean, even to go back to Joe Rogan, I think Joe Rogan at the end of all of his episodes, doesn't he promote it on his website as well?
I don't know if he does.
I
might have misspoke, but
I would imagine that somebody like him has a website that's all encompassing of everything he does.
Because I really doubt YouTube keeps any of his videos up anymore. Or I don't.
It starts on September, and yes, he actually does have a website for it.
But I think like when we start talking about websites and podcasting, that's down the road. He
has like 1,400 episodes.
Yeah. Oh no, he is a podcast.
He is
ingrained it. But I think like when talking about websites and podcasts, I think that's down the road. I think for all of us, we probably, and once again, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but you definitely come to that fork in the road where it's like, okay, how much more time and money am I going to invest in doing this show? And do I want to just keep it a hobby, or do I want to make it something more?
Yeah.
And I think if you decide to go with something more, business oriented, I think that's when you start really taking into consideration, like, okay, it's time for me to make a website, like a dedicated like homepage that I can control, that I can make my own, Because I think that was a big motivator too, is that we wanted to do more events, we wanted to secure more sponsors, and I mean. And a website is not, in this day and age, it's not that hard to get one going.
I mean,
so
even
why
if
not?
You, if
why
you
not
don't know,
invest
like,
in it?
WordPress, because it looks so overwhelming at first. Just use like Wix or
Wix or
Square
Squarespace. Those two platforms, you can have a website for a very affordable rate, probably under $100, and you own everything.
Yeah,
and
get your domain and be able to. Yeah,
It's one more step in like that more. Like when I was saying like invest in yourself, like that's one more step of. One more like ammo, like one more notch in your belt that, I'm taking this professionally.
And it's a snapshot for other businesses that are a business is, I think, in my opinion, is going to be quicker to go to your website than they are to listen to an episode.
Yep.
You have to sell yourself and you have to sell your podcast and your brand, and the website is the platform to do it, because I don't know how many businesses are going to say, well, we need to work with, local content creators. I don't know that they're going to podcasting first. I think that they're still going to search, they're still going to social, and the website is the route.
I doubt they're sending you a DM or an IM on Facebook or something like, hey, want to work with you. They're probably going to email your your website email.
Right, and it's more of a professional approach.
Yeah, and once you put it on LinkedIn, you put all the posts and your highlights features on LinkedIn, like you do a whole synchronization of that. That's going to be a lot better. Now, I do have a question though. Recently, I got a comment on my own website that it looked like Gypsy, which I was like, okay, well, thanks. But my question is, depending on the podcast, a lot of people like put a lot of pressure how the podcast website should look like. Like mine, for example, are mostly guest interviews. It's our generation, a little bit older generation that listens to it. I don't put like consulting. Let me put a suit on and look very professional while I have a public speaking. Like that's my business website. But how complicated or how professional should it be, or should it be just simple and like here's the message, here's my main goal of the podcast?
I think the conversation has to be the root of everything that you create. Without the conversation, nobody's going to listen past 15 seconds of your podcast. And audio quality, I would say, is definitely very important. But I think if I've listened to shows that are recorded on a beach and you can hear the wind the entire time, but it was a good show and I still listen to it.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation and the content has to be at the forefront of whatever you're doing, whether it's blogging or vlogging or podcasting.
What do you think about
what Blythe said? Like what Blythe said.
Second that.
I guess just stay true to your message. I mean, know what your message is and what your intent is, and stay true to it. I mean, for us, I mean, we're talking about like pop culture, comic books, and things like that. Like, no, we're not, all in businesses or business suits on our website.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is what you're going to get, and we're going to give you the best product. But yeah, we just stay true to ourselves.
Authentic.
Not trying to be,
That phrase has been beaten over everybody's head over the past year, but it's for a reason. If you're not authentically yourself, people can see through that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That's true. What do you think should be the budget though when you first start podcasting, just on the mic itself, and like, do you need to buy a brand new camera to use the
under
better
$100.
picture?
You can record a show with
you
your
can.
cell phone.
Hell, I think there's an app for it.
Yeah.
Like a podcast or
I mean, Audacity, you can use that, and it's free.
I still use. Look,
They just updated, by the way.
The voice
I
recorder
updated
on an iPhone. You can record right there. Buy a $20 lapel mic off of Amazon. People will use the fear of equipment to stop them from getting started.
Yeah.
And if you just go back to like my earlier point, the content has to be at the forefront. If you have something to say, structure it in a show format of however you want to say it, whether it's an interview guest or whether you're solo hosting. There are plenty of resources. Don't let that fear of equipment or that fear of hitting publish stop you.
yeah, just get your feet underneath you. Like at least get used to talking, hearing your own voice, like fiddling around with like certain settings, and then like I firmly believe like you just got to put some work in, and then you're gonna hit that fork in the road where it's like, okay, I feel comfortable. Now it's time to upgrade equipment. It's time to think about websites. It's time to think about merch. It's like you're gonna hit that fork in the road, but you got to put in like.
I feel like you walk.
Yeah, I feel like I meet a lot of people that just want to do it all, and it's like, man, no, I just now feel confident in giving you advice. Like, no, that's like I would not just try to. It's too much to take in, Like you will, like Blythe said, you will scare yourself out of it when you start thinking about every single part. And it just like podcasting at the heart of it is just people hopping on the mics and talking.
You got to get the reps. Whatever your creative field, you have to get the reps. And the only way you're going to get them is probably taking them yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I still have the $20 Amazon mic.
you
I
go.
think that's like the best one. I actually bought like $150, like a big mic. And it's still to this day, I don't know what's wrong with it. I haven't hooked it up correctly.
I've been using a Blue Yeti mic for like the past 3 or 4 years, and I only recently, like during COVID, Badr helped me fix a lot of the audio issues that were wrong with it.
I feel like it's a whole different science, and I'm not that tacky. Like, I know how to record it and edit and all that, but I just want to like talk.
I think that's why I'm starting to see. I've started to notice a trend. Like, there's podcasters, folks that are hopping on the mics that are like the content creators, but I'm seeing like a large spike in editors, like people offering their podcast editing services for you, which I think is
I
genius.
do podcast editing, yeah.
'Cause a lot
I
of-
offer that for clients. I have 3 podcasts that I edit.
good.
Nice.
I mean, it's a thing too. Like, I never
yeah.
thought I'd make money out of it.
I will say that the thing I miss the most about doing radio is having a producer, having somebody in your ear that you can bounce ideas off of, that gets somebody on the phone, that's monitors breaking news and things like that. I miss having a producer. That's until I persuade Badr to do it for me.
No, that's actually, it's, and that's what we're talking about, the power of podcasting, because I know we're kind of jumping between little different topics, but the main topic of today is the power of podcasting alone, because, I mean, just because of editing and everything, like through the virus situation, I was able to get clients to edit their podcast, and I'm like, I do this for free for myself. Like, I can do it for you.
That's
like,
awesome.
People need to get started. I feel like people just overwhelm it and overthink it and just do it, man.
And it's
Girl,
tough.
like-
It is scary, but you can recognize that it's scary and still do it. I don't think I listened to my own voice on a show for like the first 6 months that I did radio.
Really?
I'm like, as soon as I heard my voice, I'd shut it off.
I listen to my voice. I'm like, why are people listening to this weird accent?
Yeah.
And I catch myself mispronouncing stuff all the time.
Yeah, I mean, my ego's the size of a giant air balloon. So yeah, like when I first started, I was definitely listening back, mainly because I just really enjoyed recording with my friends. But then as I got serious about podcasting, it was like, let me painstakingly nitpick everything about me, like my voice, how stupid you sound. What type of question was that? Was that a joke? But I think it made me a lot more aware and confident in speaking now. Now, like.
Yeah.
I kind of I try to speak with intent. I'm trying to,
That's so true because you hear stuff
as I go silent, as I drop out. But yeah, listen
What's
to
the
yourself.
weirdest things though? Like, because I would say like
Oh,
absolutely all the time.
Man,
like,
I
would say absolutely.
What was my word? There was a phrase I kept saying.
Like every
and it
other sentence.
drives me wild. Like I was surprised people weren't emailing.
Or I would say beforehand. Like
Yeah,
instead of prior
have-
hand, I'd say beforehand. I caught myself that too.
But you know what? There was a period where I was trying to be way too professional, and I think I was too stiff because I had let my own perception of myself get to me. But no one else cared. I mean, like, we weren't getting emails saying, yo, Badr, that was a shitty, like, sorry, that was a crap
It's
joke.
okay, you can cuss.
That was a terrible joke or something, But, and
You ruined my day, man.
yeah, like, no one cared. It was like, that's what I'm saying with podcasting. Like, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be like, like I said, you're going to get to that point where if you decide to go serious and take it professional, then it's going to feel like a job sometimes.
And you will get people that will
But
come
like,
down on you.
yeah, but like in the beginning, just record, like get your, like Blythe was saying, like reps and learn from that, get stronger from that.
What was your thing? Like you keep repeating or? Because you say you didn't listen to yourself at first.
I don't think. I know there's words that I repeat, but I think it goes in phases where it's like one word and then I'll repeat it for one show and then it doesn't happen again. I think that's more of what happens to me. Probably. Yeah, definitely.
I feel like we overanalyze ourselves, like, in the way we speak too, though, because you might have somebody listen to it, be like, this sounds amazing. And you're like, no, it does not. Like, what's wrong with you?
I still have those moments where I'll do a recording, especially when I made the transition to solo hosting, where I would record and then I send it all off to my editor. And then the moment that you press play to watch it or listen to it, that's like the moment of intensity. It was like, oh. And it's like, oh, okay, it wasn't that bad. I think I just built the fear up in my head.
Always. I'm in the middle of recording. I'm like, I sound so stupid. But then listening back, I'm like, yeah, not bad at all. Good job.
I mean, that happens to me too on like Zoom calls, because I'll ask a question, I'll be like, I'm editing this out. I'd be like, excuse me for a moment. Like, I use that car nonstop.
That's the other thing too. You can edit it. Like, you don't need to keep everything. I think when I started, I just did not want to edit because I was too afraid. So I just kept everything, and it would just. I'm sure some of them old ones are so cringe.
Speaking of which, I still have audio files like going back to 2014 of before we edited out, because it was a live radio show. So we had commercial breaks, and during the commercial breaks, I kept those in. But on the feed that I was recording it from, you don't hear the commercial. So all you have is just like 6 minutes of dead air, and then the show comes back on. So there's still some shows. I can't delete them though. I'm just going to keep them live. It's a learning experience in time.
That's the other thing about podcasting I've been thinking a lot lately is, like, this is something that I can look back on. Like sometimes when I look back at show notes and I'm looking at certain episodes. Actually, for example, like 2 Sundays ago, we usually record on Sundays. We had a buddy come on. He's been like a guest co-host a lot of times, but it was his last day in town. Mm-hmm. And while we were recording, I was like, yo, you used to email us a lot. Like, that's how we kind of got to know him. He was emailing the show a lot because he loved the show. Then eventually we met him, really liked him, started hanging out, just grew a genuine friendship. We'd invite him on the show, but I was trying to find his first email, and I found it. It was from like I think 2016. So it was cool to read that email, and then I kind of knew what episode like his first one was on. So it's kind of a cool memory book or
time capsule.
Thank you. That's the word. It's a great time capsule, because every now and then I'll think about a guest I had on. I was like, oh yeah, that was this year and this came out. I was going through this or whatever this was going on. So to think about, like, I'm building this time capsule that, wherever this podcast goes, at least I can look, I have something to look back and like genuinely probably hear literally the growth, my growth.
Do you guys think podcasting is going to kill the radio though? Like 20, 30 years down the road?
Nah, I think because
50.
I think that's a different audience. Like, people who listen to the radio are probably listening to it for different reasons, to get like local news. Think about like when there's a storm or something, you're probably tuning into the radio to find out what bridges are closing, what's going on.
I'm not telling you that on my podcast.
That the local news aspect, when something is coming or going on, that's when I
like
think
real
that
time.
It's
that real time.
The most powerful. But as far as maybe just like listening to music, I do think those habits have already started shifting, have already started changing. I think the future of radio, as in you get in your car and you turn on a radio station, I think is going to move more into syndication, probably syndication of podcasts. But I do think there's absolutely still a place for local radio, especially from a sports and news perspective, because no one is going to be able to give you that view unless you're a local.
Yeah, and I mean, if a game is live and everything too, you can listen. Like, I remember one time it was the final of the World Cup. Like, I could not see it on TV, so I was like, oh, you can do this on radio. Yep. This is kind of cool.
Play by play.
Yeah, but that also, it's great though, because kind of shifting everything to the podcast and everything, like, you have ads, you have, promotions you can run on your own podcast. That's when the money starts kind of changing direction a little bit more towards your podcast.
Yeah, but I'm noticing more and more radio shows radio companies are, incorporating podcasts. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't think they'll die, because I think some of them
NPR,
are.
you have to embrace it.
Some of them are smartening up, like, to follow
NPR is pretty
the trend.
great, like what they're doing with their podcasting and stuff. Like,
those are some of the best podcasts.
Well, I think it's a different approach, because from a local radio perspective, they don't see the money in it yet, and right now that's very much you have to survive as far as like being a local. If you're a news company, even some of the local news companies here, they're not doing as well because they're getting bought out by larger companies. It's becoming less and less local, so the local stations do have to sort of lean on other local creators in order to get that local feel. And I'm not 100% sure that the model that a lot of old school radio executives have been in for so long, that model doesn't exist anymore. You have to embrace podcasting. I remember going to 1010 and saying, hey, we have to have a podcast. They didn't have any podcasting whatsoever. It's a sports radio station. Like, people want to listen to radio shows. They're not in their car all day to listen to these shows. You got to be able to put them on a podcast feed. And so I begged them, and they gave me the show file after every show, and that's what I ended up putting up in the podcast feed.
Yeah, because at first they would have like the app and stuff. You can kind of listen to it if you're not, but it's still not as convenient.
It's one of those things like you're working a job. You can't listen to radio all. I mean, a few lucky people maybe work in construction or something, or outside somehow.
Or you don't want to just see the highlights. Right. You just want to kind of see listen to everything.
Right.
Oh goodness. Well, I feel like we kind of actually talked about a lot of topics, but we touched really good on the power of podcasting itself. I mean, I want to kind of go back to the Jacksonville podcast. Are we going to have like a conference, or like how big are we going to get this group?
That's what we were actually, we've been stewing over this over the last sort of few months. It's like, well, what, because there is, I don't want to say that pressure, but there is kind of a pressure of like, how do we continue to make these events interesting? How do we keep getting, building that bridge further and further and connecting more people as this medium grows and as Jacksonville grows? I think there are some talks with having, possibly a local conference.
JexCon, what are we going to call it?
But then you're taking up, I think, the education level. Education and networking, I think, is always going to be the goal of any event, whether we have 5 people or whether we have 500. But it's just figuring out what that's going to look like, especially in, this COVID world. We're probably not going to be able to hold events like that, in the near future. But I think we've definitely talked about, what is the next level up, and I think it makes sense.
Yeah. I
also wonder how many like Jacksonville people like actually open a podcast during COVID too. So
that's true too.
It's gonna grow even more.
That would have been the opportunity for a lot of people to get started. It was during COVID. Good point.
Yeah, opportunity is still perfect, huh?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's if you're a content creator, that's another thing. Like, don't, just because a lot of people already have a podcast or a lot of people already have a blog or a lot of people are already on YouTube and social media, don't let that stop you. Like, you have your own unique voice, and that's why people are coming to listen, because they want to hear your unique voice.
Yeah. Any last advice you guys would love to give to the podcasters if somebody is trying to open a podcast? But again, if you're trying to open a podcast straight up for profit, guys, I've said it before, just work as an Uber driver for a couple hours, you'll make more money.
Yeah.
You said work as an Uber driver? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not kidding. It might take you like 2 to 3 hours.
You can get business cards with your podcast on it and throw it in that little...
Ooh. With the mints.
Yes.
Mints. Hey.
Or do Uber Eats and just throw it in their bag, too.
I think...
Hey, enjoy the food and listen to my podcast.
I will say podcasting in this day and age is so easy to get into and start, and the amount of resources out there is plentiful. I mean, really, one of the first steps you do with podcasting is finding a podcasting host. And a lot of those hosts that I've noticed, and I can only really speak for Buzzsprout, but I have people like other podcast hosts, they have a lot of resources on their website, whether it be, Buzzsprout, Libsyn, Burberry, I think is the other one.
Blueberry or
Burberry.
Something like that.
But I think there's just so many resources out there. And there's so many avenues too, whether if you want to do a strictly audio podcast or do something like a YouTube series. There's not that line of delineation is pretty great for the most part. I think just jump into it. Be a sponge, absorb as much as you can, get ready to fail and stumble and feel awkward and feel like there's no point in doing it, but just give it a shot. Like I said, you're gonna get to that point where it's gonna either get really fun or you just lose interest, and that's fine too.
True, very true. Hit publish. That's my number one piece of advice. Hit publish. It's very scary.
That's the last step.
Yeah, it's very scary to do once you've recorded it. The recording is the easy part. Yeah. It's the fear of sending it out to people and what are people going to think and how am I going to do this, and hitting publish is probably the biggest hurdle. What
is it that you told me once? You said if you're waiting for perfection, it'll never come.
You're going to be waiting for a long time.
Waiting for a long time. Yeah, just do it.
Jab, hook kind of deal too. Like, just throw the information out there. Doesn't have to be 100%. Like, what would be the ideal? But just throw the information out there. You don't know what you can get in back. So.
You'll either find an excuse or you'll find a way.
And I mean, I'll add one more thing. Listen to the podcast or whatever shows that you like and like see what they do. Like, why do you like them? Why do you tune in every week?
Good
like,
point.
what are elements? Because I know when I was starting, I was listening to a few podcasts and I would just feel like, okay, I really like their segment. How can I make that my own? I really like how they do this. How can I make it my own? And I think that's an important question that you got to ask yourself. How do you make it your own? Because you could easily just kind of copy the idea, but make it your own so that way you establish that unique voice, and that's how people keep coming back.
Nice.
Very true.
And if I can add one more thing to that, just make a schedule also. If you're going to try to do like a weekly or bi-weekly.
Yeah, good point.
Like, make a schedule. It's very, very important. Like, I've been guilty of like missing episodes before because I slacked on the episodes, or I lost my voice one time, so I couldn't do nothing for 2 weeks. So make a schedule and edit. Don't leave it last minute, especially if you want to be consistent.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Well said.
Now, the very last question of every episode that we have here, and whoever wants to answer this first, this is one of my favorite questions too. Well, before I go there, I forgot. Where can people get a hold of you guys? Where can people connect with you?
Sure, I'm on all the social media platforms at Blythe Brum. Well, except Twitter, I deactivated for a little while. But Instagram, you can go to my website, bonjourwithblythe.com. That has my podcast on there and links to all the other work that I do.
And the Short Box podcast is available on most podcast apps, whether it be Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, etc. Just search for the Short Box. That's 3 words. And then we're all over social media as Short Box Jacks or the Short Box. Or you can go to our website,
and
shortboxjacks.com. JAX.
JAX. Okay. Last question. Whoever wants to get this. What is your personal definition of success?
That's a good one.
Goodness, I think for me, being an entrepreneur is being self-sustainable. That's my definition of success.
Happiness without regret.
Oh, I like that too.
Just thought about it. I've seen it on a candy wrapper.
It's like,
Good job, Snapple. Yeah, happiness without regret.
He's gonna catch this clip, the podcast, and be like, "Here's my definition." Yeah. Well, I always ask that last question because I feel like everybody's trying to like be successful and achieve a success definition that somebody else might have made it for them, and I think it's important to kind of define our own successful stage or what we define as success. So this way, we can just do what we like and what we think is awesome. So thank you. And thank you both of you guys for being
Thank
here.
you for having us.
I definitely want to thank Studio Podcast Suites here in Jax, Florida.
Yes.
I will actually, like you have the whole flyer here. Back in the back, they actually have a screen, you guys, on a picture. I look so much younger there. And much skinnier, but let's forget about that part.
It's the COVID. COVID did it to us all.
Yes, we're going to blame COVID. Oh, there we go. So we said it. The screen just zoomed into the whole thing. So now you can definitely tell. Well, I'll attach all the information for both of our guests today, as well as for the podcast suites here in Jacksonville, Florida. So you definitely should come here. Tell Gary Romina send you, or Jacksonville Podcaster Group send you guys. So this way you can definitely go ahead and reserve the studio. The camera is really awesome. We love the camera because it keeps moving. Like if I like wave, it like moves where I go kind of thing. Like we're just going to play with that.
Hey, it's not recognizing me though.
It starts smoking. We're like, all right, stop. Too much movement.
I think because your face is on the profile more. Now, okay, so if you look at it and then wave, it actually,
then wave.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because it's like if it's on the profile, it needs to catch the eyes.
Oh, right.
It's the eyes, Chico.